Here we have my handy total cost of ownership calculator, and I'll talk you through this. And if you are interested in going through this and comparing it to storage that you have or storage that you're looking at, you can feel free to reach out to us at Panzura or one of our sales reps, and we can walk you through this. So what do you need to know about the total cost of ownership of storage in general? And some of these TCO calculators can include things like full-time employees or power and cooling and other common costs. I've removed that from this simply because I've never seen a use case where adding or removing a storage array causes somebody to get let go, right? They just need to change what they know, and then they can manage that system. So I'm really focusing on the cost of deploying Panzura CloudFS relative to deploying any other type of storage array. It could be on premises or in cloud, and then taking into account some things that really matter when buying cyber storage. So there's the Panzura cost of CloudFS, which is our software costs, and we are a software company. We don't sell hardware, which means that you also need to buy some kind of back-end object store. So our CloudFS costs in, let's say, terabytes per year is the unit. Then you can look at back-end object storage costs. So your back-end object store could be an on-premises system, and then it's really easy to do the math. You just take your total cost, divide it by the terabytes, divide it by how many years you're going to own it, 3, 4, 5, and put that number in there. And then I gave an example of how to do the math on like AWS costs for an S3 bucket for the amount of capacity that you have. Then there are some on-premises hardware solutions that are required to deploy CloudFS. Those would be VMs. So you take in the full cost of the on-premises supporting hardware for this solution, as well as if there are any costs to deploy in cloud. So let's say you don't want to do any VMs in cloud, you can just zero that out, and that cost goes away. And then finally, the installation cost of implementing CloudFS. Very straightforward, right? That's all it takes to deploy CloudFS within your enterprise is our software running on some hardware in as many locations as you want. Notice that we don't charge per location. We charge based on capacity, right? Based on dollars per terabyte per year. So you could have this in 3 sites, you can have this in 30 sites. We don't care. If it's 500 terabytes, it's 500 terabytes. That's it. When comparing to our competition, if you are buying more of the same, and you are putting siloed storage in various locations, then you care about the sites because you are duplicating costs, right? Storage costs, for example. So you have to do the math there, right? What are you paying for that silo of storage, divided by how many terabytes, divided by how many years you're going to keep it. And then that number goes in there. If you are using cloud storage as a back end, then you can add that in there as well. Any supporting on-premises hardware, infrastructure costs, maintenance costs, and all that. So this is a really fair comparison of what you're looking at from Panzura compared to really anybody else. I'm going to skip over this section really fast and go down to the common stuff. Data growth and TCO term. Obviously, if you put the term here of 5 years, then you want to do the math on your storage array of 5 years if you're buying hardware. If it goes to 3, then you can do the math by 3. But everything will get changed when you when you change the term. Data growth, Petra said in this presentation, it's 40% per year. I defaulted to 20, but if you add 40% per year, it basically makes the scale go up automatically for you. So going back, what are the things that you care about when purchasing storage? First and foremost on your mind is migration costs. If you have a silo of storage sitting on the floor for 5 years, then by year 4, you need to consider, where am I going to move this to? So at the 4th year, you have to think about, where am I going to move this to? Because capacity has gotten so huge that it could take 6 months to migrate from one storage array to another. See, what is the cost to do that initial migration? Well, if you're moving off of our competition on the Panzera, it'll cost the same as a one-time cost to move it off the competition to another storage array. But what about the next time, right? If you're staying with what you have, you're going to have to pay that again. But with Panzera, there's no migration costs, right? First of all, your backend object stores will automatically be upgraded by your cloud service provider. Second, if you are listening to this, you can ask our sales reps about it. If you don't like us, we will migrate off of us for free, right? Obviously, you have to still buy the other storage and the whole 9 yards, but our professional services to move away for CloudFS will cost you nothing. What else do you care about? Backups, right? Because we're an immutable file system, our customers don't do backups. They initially do it for maybe a year and then they go, we're never going to see these. We don't need them. And your retention period is set within the CloudFS file system. So if you have 7-year, 20-year retention, you set that and nothing gets removed during that retention period. So you still have compliance, especially if you're doing cloud mirroring to a second cloud provider. Right. So sometimes your requirements are around being within multiple hyperscalers, right? So it's not all of your data is in one place. If you do cloud mirroring, you can mirror to a second cloud provider, meets that regulatory requirement. So all you have to do is say, okay, do you want cloud mirroring or not? And if you say yes, then the math is here. How much I'm assuming for the cloud mirroring cost for a second object store. However, with our competition, you still have to do backups, and you know what your backups cost are. You know what your backups cost you in a dollars per terabyte per year basis, right? Just because you're moving to CloudFS doesn't mean you're going to get rid of your your backup provider simply because you have other file systems like Windows file systems to back up. But if you do go to CloudFS, you don't have to back us up anymore. But you do have to back up the competition. You know what that costs you, and that money's in there. The last bit could be a little bit controversial, so you can zero this out if you'd like, but it's the cost of being hit with ransomware. You're not worried about it until it happens. And when it happens, it's really painful. I have taken numbers from like the manufacturing industry. The cost is $80,000 per hour to be down due to ransomware or really anything else. The great thing about our user impacted hours is that with our recovery point objective of virtually instantaneous, you'll probably lose an hour of productivity from your actual users. So I put a fixed number of 1, right, as your cost of ransomware, right? Because you're going to be down, right? If the users see that you're infected, they're going to get up, they're going to go to lunch, they're going to go get a cup of coffee, but you can send an email or a text to everybody and say, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. The system will be online within an hour. Can't say the same thing about our competition, right? People tend to be down for days or weeks. I put 8 hours in here, but if you increase that number to 16, you can see the associated pain. You can see the associated pain of ransomware right there. All right, so I put in that folks will be down for 8 hours, and then it's at least a reasonable number. And then how many incidents have you had in the term of the total cost of ownership, right? So the 5-year term, if you're running it, you can put in 1. If you don't want to do this math, you can just put in 0, and it all goes away. But then you're basically saying, I'm never going to get hit with ransomware and I'm never going to take any downtime. And it is important to forecast that for a true total cost of ownership. So we're going to say 1 incident. And then lastly, it's just the basic stuff like capacity, right? How much capacity are you going to buy? These two numbers shouldn't be the same. Like Petra mentioned, we have a lot of deduplication on our back end. So if we're duplicating data, if we're deduplicating data, the amount of capacity that you're going to have to buy from CloudFS is going to be different than the amount of capacity from our competition. Right? Even though our competition does do dedupe, if you're buying silos, you're going to have replicated amounts of data, right? You're going to have more impact from RAID all that kind of stuff. And this is going to be raw capacity. Since we're using an object store, we're not going to get hit with any of that. And then how many snapshots? Snapshots are important. Both sides have to do them. Our competition, their snapshots are significantly more expensive, right? And then I've exposed the kind of math that I've done there. So the traditional customer does about 35 snapshots. And when you're comparing CloudFS to almost anybody, we're considerably less expensive for snapshotting because it's built into our system. An actual snapshot isn't going to cost you much. So that's how to run a total cost of ownership, right? What are you paying for the thing? What does it cost to keep running? What does it protect you from, like a ransomware attack? And then all the associated other backup costs and stuff like that. Petra, back to you.
All right, thank you. And one thing to add, I suppose, on your comments about ransomware, I've read multiple studies that say that organizations can't even come close to their SLA for downtime. It ends up being theoretical, and that simply does not survive contact with the real world.
Right. Most folks won't even make it through their failure contingency plans, right? To be able to bring up their secondary systems and things like that. Every test that's been run with a few of my former, when I was on the IT side of things, when I was doing consulting, every year they ran it and it failed. And the larger the organization is, the more improbable it is to pass an audit of their survivability. And this you can do in real time. Just bring up another file system and show that it's capable.